right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get this work session started. With us tonight, we have Warren Nevad from the University of Tennessee Municipal Technical Advisory Service. And we also have Mr. John Grubbs, got it right this time, not Gruggs, but Grubbs, from the same place, UT MTAS. And a couple of things to talk about is just reviewing the charter. Also looking at the pay scale, and I think Mr. Grubbs has already got his dialed in here and on the computer, so we'll go ahead and start with you, Mr. Grubbs. Let me say that when we Mr. Stokes, Richard Stokes, you're probably familiar with Mr. Stokes. I know that he's retired from UT now and works for the city of Smyrna now. Is that right? Yes. Yeah, and they got a good employee there. But he did a pay scale for us, and that we adopted, and about 3 years ago now. The world has turned since it. About 3 years. Has it been longer? Yeah, probably about 3 years ago. But as we know, the world has turned and things has happened, and the pay scale is not where it should be. So I thought it'd be a good idea to bring you up as we look at surrounding communities, and they gave raises in double digits. So talk to us a little bit about how we should look at redoing a pay scale and the steps maybe we should take. If you could push that button, Mr. John Scrubs, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Now, do I have to stay at the podium, or can I wander around?
You wander around. Yeah, you wander around.
Okay. I didn't know if the mic would pick me up well or not. So again, I'm John Grubbs. I'm a human resource consultant from UT MTAS. And Mayor Hayes has asked me to take a look at a couple of things related to your pay. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Won't take very long. So the first thing that I was interested in finding out is what's the relationship between your pay and how long somebody's been in pay and in a position, and whether that makes sense, and whether you need to account for additional criteria for advancing pay. One of the challenges is, in this kind of free agency market out there, sometimes you find someone with skill and you have to insert them at a higher rate than the starting rate. Otherwise you can't recruit, you can't access applicant stock. So just a couple of things to look at. First of all, I want to let you know that you can find out, the city can find out some comparable data information by going on to our salary survey. It's you find there's a website there, survey.mtas.tennessee.edu, and I pulled some data for all of the available positions that lined up with the positions that you have here at Livingston. One in particular that's hard to staff and it's hard to retain is police officers. I wanted to do some comparisons of police officers in this area, but I also wanted to take a look at whether or not it made sense to go out and do another pay study. And for the record, Richard Stokes has done some pay studies. He's no longer with us. We don't do the class comp design, but we do provide a list of known consultants in the area that do that. Of course, you'd have to pay them to do that. Again, Livingston can go on and look at the data that we do have in our salary survey. It's not absolutely complete data. It's voluntary submissions by cities. I think we have around 70 or so cities participating at this point, but it gives you kind of a wet finger in the wind comparison of what other cities in your area are paying for various positions. So it's like, any of you in real estate? Okay, well, you've bought or sold a house, right? All right, so you look at your market comps, and that's what that salary survey does. It's based on the starting pay and the average actual pay in a position at that point in time. So what we did, we pulled data for a variety of positions, but if you'll focus here, is Sparta, Livingston, Cookeville, Carthage, Hartsville, Trousdale County, a variety, of cities that submitted in your area. So we thought it would make sense to look at those in comparison and also look at the labor market in general in comparison. But specifically, like I said before, we focused and highlighted the example on police officer. And you've got several instances here. You've got police officers from Sparta, Livingston, Hartsville, Cookeville, all good, so forth. So, in order to understand the relationship between pay and how long you were here, of course there are other variables, right? It could be pay for performance. If someone does a good job, they get a pay raise. Or if you're in a step plan that has a defined amount each year, you're here 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you get a percentage increase defined by that step plan, which is what you have. I wanted to take a look at the relationship between current pay and time in position. So in order to do that, what I did is I ran a correlation coefficient, statistical measure, to determine within a reasonable level of 95% confidence level, and determine if it's a significant measure, and if it's less than 0.05, which that's less than 0.001, so it's a significant measure. It gave us a Pearson correlation of 0.844. And in order to find out the percent, the likelihood, the goodness of fit, you have to multiply, you square 8.844, and it gives you 71.2%. So it's a 71.2% likelihood based on your current pay of employees and their current time and position that pay probably does affect, or their time and position probably does affect their pay. So from that, I ran a simple regression using all of the data points, all of the people who are paid by Livingston. If you'll notice here, early, and this is how much they're paid, and this is years per service. So up to 20 years, up to this point right here, it's really tightly clustered around that line. So that indicates to me that when people start out here, they stay on that step plan, and they continue to stay on that step plan. The longer someone is here, the greater the likelihood that there's deviation. For example, these two data points are making around $25 an hour and have been here between 15 and 20 years. These people have been here a little over 30, almost 40 years, and are making about the same. But you get out here, and it looks like these people are making just a little more than $30 per hour, and they've been here from 22 to 35, 38, 41, 42, 47 years, and they look kind of topped out. It also, from this, you get these bar charts. The bar charts show your clusters that most of the people here are relatively new, with a couple of flyers that have been here for a really long time, and most people here are still early in their pay band, except for a couple that have been here, a long time and or are paid significantly. Now you've got this one flyer who's very new to the organization, but paid very well comparatively to the rest of the people who are very new. Now what that indicates to me is that there was someone who had a high skill set that was rare, hard to find, that you had to go out and bust your salary cap, for an NFL term, and go get that talent. And the current pay plan doesn't account for that need. So that's one reason I think the pace, you need to do a classification compensation study and bring in a consultant that can customize your pay plan for those types of situations. Because there's no prohibition. I'll go back to this. There's no prohibition against doing it per se, but it's not really anticipated by your plan. It needs to be expanded to anticipate those needs, and also potentially to account for some other variation. I want to talk about the variation now. The current pay plan, well, I'm going to go to this next. No, I'm not. I'm going to come back. And you have your pay plan in front of you. For each position, there's a dollar amount up in the right-hand corner that they get as an increase per year. What I did was I took that as a percentage of the pay. So people in some positions get a 1.18%. Some people get a 2%. Some people get a 1.09% pay increase, and some positions get a 0.53, a 0.5% pay increase. Now, what that does over time, if you compare a position to a position, I use business tax clerk and patrol officer, is they start somewhere close to one another at the beginning, but over time they separate. If they were on the same percentage of pay increase, this blue line indicates what the business tax clerk would be making. The patrol officer ends up over time topping out at $38,604. The business tax clerk tops out at $44,532. So there's a significant gap on the tail end, but there's not a significant gap on the front end. So that might be a consideration. It depends on, well, I mean, obviously business tax clerk has some valuable and hard to find skills, but they're not as in demand and hard to retain as a police force these days. So, as I said before, of particular interest was the police patrol position, not the captain, not the sergeant, lieutenant, not the command staff, but the greater of the force. It's police patrol. They're hard to source, they're hard to go out and get, and they're hard to retain in today's market. So I wanted to compare a couple of things. You look at this band here: garbage truck driver, 29,120, patrolman, 29,120, police dispatcher, 29,120. They all start at the same. And the garbage truck driver increases by 1.21% each year. So that person, yeah, they have a CDL, and that's noteworthy. That's worth factoring in to pay, but there are certain required trainings that patrol people have to engage in as well, and certifications they have to maintain. So they get 1.21%, they get 1.09%, business tax clerk gets 1.18%. And what this does over time, it creates a gap. That gap is right here, but the market median from where we pulled that data we talked about earlier, the market median starting pay in your area in competing cities is $37,286. And when I say that's not an average, that's the midpoint, just like your median when you're going out and buying a house or selling a house, you want to know what the median price is. And then the market median actual pay. Now this indicates to me that maybe these employees haven't been in that position very long, but they start at $37,286, and right now they're averaging $38,556 in the target areas around your city. So that's a $5,000 gap between the average pay right now in Livingston. Remember, the starting pay is $29,120, and there's an average pay of $33,500. That average pay of what people are making on an average of 2.17 years in position, and that's an average, it's not a median. That average pay is still below the market median start pay. So if you wanted to set a philosophy that you wanted to match the market, you would need a pay study, a class comp study, to determine how far behind each of these positions were, how far behind the city as a whole would be, and of course there's a catch-up cost to that. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But that indicates to me that the pay scale, while it might have been good when it was put in place, hadn't kept up. Inflation is pretty high, and over the last 5 years, I'm going to talk about the effect of inflation on that. But before we get to that, I also went to this source called ONET Online. It's the U.S. government's Department of Labor salary and job description and job task database and what it does. And you can go on there. Any of you can go on there. It's free access. And you can search for police officer. And it'll pull up here police and sheriff's patrol officers. From that, it gives you some data. If you put in your state and your zip code, it'll tell you what north central Tennessee non-metropolitan areas median, low, and high pays are, and then Tennessee as a whole, and then United States. And that's just craziness right there. But you know, that includes California, New York, all the high dollar areas. But for kind of sticking a flag in the ground purposes, let's do this. The patrol start here is just below the north central Tennessee non-metropolitan area start. 29,120 is compared to 32,10. And then the average actual is quite a bit below the median that they have. So what effect this has is young officers joining a force, they may not care as much about benefits as they do what goes in their pocket at first, because they're trying to save their money, trying to buy a house, trying to live. Officers that have been here for a while that may not be starting out are looking at the benefits, but they're also looking at the pay, because that officer who's been seasoned might look down the road and say, well, you know what, $5,000 more a year and a take-home car or whatever perks they're getting, I may just go there instead of working here, or a sheriff's department, or some even cross the line into Kentucky when we're border areas like this. So this presents an attraction and retention challenge as well. So in order to kind of illustrate the effect over time that the Consumer Price Index has had, if you go back to 2018, so the last 5 years, these numbers aren't scary right here. 1 month, 12 month, they're not scary. They start to get a little scarier as you creep out here. The 12th month, and this is all items, not seasonally adjusted, and this includes food and energy items. Food and energy are volatile, so it's best to take a look without food and energy when you're looking at how much over time the inflation has affected pay scales, or you know, how much I put in my pocket versus how much I have to pay for goods and services out there to live in the world. So
I do have a question.
Yes.
You're talking about inflation. What have you seen, and I know you're probably going through it, but just a number off the top of your head as far as pay year to year for the last 2 or 3 years? I mean, jump from 2%, 4%, 8%. What have you?
it just depends. So some cities are obviously have more money than others, right? And they can respond more quickly to these influences, these pressures. Some cities are doing 4 or 8%. I've seen them do, 16% plus a bonus, a hiring bonus, a retention bonus, if they've got the money to do that. Some of the cities, in Franklin's an example, Brentwood's an example. But you know what? Right, they've got extra cash on hand for those things. But some smaller cities that are competing with them, like Nolensville, Spring Hill, where Richard Stokes is, they're having to compete. So they're having to redirect some of their funding into that to catch up, at least in key areas. And that's where a class comp consultant would be really beneficial to you all, is to help you identify which areas and have a plan to spend money on immediate, urgent, and important needs, and then have a plan for catch up on needs that aren't as pressing right now on salaries. But you know, including food and energy is 18.8%. The change in what it costs us to pay for things over the last 5 years, excluding food and energy, the more volatile indexes, it's still 17.2%. So if you haven't updated a pay plan and you haven't accounted for that 17.2%, and people are getting maximum in your pay plan 2% per year in a step, And at one point in time, 2% would keep up with inflation. If you look at 2018, 12-month, you're still lagging a little behind at 2%, but then you're catching up the next year. You're staying stable the next year, but then all of a sudden you have this shock event that pushes everything forward in a tsunami. And you're either going to have to address it now, or you're going to have to address it later, but it's going to be a pain point when it comes to recruiting and hiring talent at some point. So you look at these situations, and we've got a few recommendations. This is the high-level flyover impasse recommendations. Seek professional assistance in pay plan design and redesign. Again, we'll provide you with a list. We checked last year with several vendors that do this to make sure they're still doing this, and they are, and we have a list of those. Several of them have worked with Tennessee cities. Some of them have not, but are still reputable. There are a couple that have quite a bit of experience in putting together a market-based pay plan compensation design, usually in pay grades and ranges, sometimes in step plans. But before you do that, I would encourage you strategically to think of a few things. First of all, define what your philosophy is going to be for all positions, and maybe key positions initially. You want to determine if you're going to lead, lag, or match the market. Lead the market means you're going to pay more than the market median. Lag means, well, we just can't pay what the market median pays, and we're just going to have to, shop at discount, so to speak. And match the market, just keeping up with the Joneses, making sure that you're at least giving the same pay that your competitors are, not just your competitors from other cities. Now, this is important. You need to know where your people are leaving and going to. If employees are leaving to go to a distribution center here, or a factory here, or go to another agency in public service, you need to know those things. And Class Comp consultant can help you uncover some of those things. You need to know where they're going so that you know who your competition is, right? If you're the Titans, you probably need to go out and get a quarterback, say, before your running back is worn out. But then do a gap analysis between your current state, where you're at right now, and where you want to be, and come up with a cost. I mean, it's probably going to be some sticker shock on it once you bundle it all together and start to look at the bottom dollar. But the cost of not catching up, what's that? Really? The cost of catch-up is going to be expensive, but the cost of not catching up is going to be kicking that can down the road, and it's going to be a danger to providing quality service to the citizens, potentially.
Are we behind because of compensation inflation, or just inflation in general, or were we behind, or are we behind before inflation ever hit?
You were a little behind before inflation hit because you set a maximum trend of 2%. The most someone in a position here, depending on what position they're slotted in, can get is 2% based on their pay plan. Some positions are only getting 0.53% per year. And that's automatically behind. I mean, I've never experienced a year that had only 0.53% inflation. So you're setting those positions up for failure, and you're also setting it up so that you've got a different set of trend lines for positions, and that's not necessarily a bad thing if you're starting certain positions out ahead and letting the market catch up with them eventually. But if you're starting them out behind in the market and not giving them an opportunity to float with the level of all boats, that could be a challenge to attraction and retention. So both, to answer your question, I think in some cases. But then you would need to prioritize which ones of these or multiples of these positions are to be focused on immediately, and then next, based on your market realities, your exit numbers, your applicant flow numbers, how hard it is to recruit and retain. And then at least every 2 years, annually if possible, run a sanity check on your pay plan in comparison to, that year's current state of affairs, that year's current consumer price index, turnover rates, applicant flow, and so forth. But inside that plan, have some documented flexibility.
Excuse me, John, do you all do that? Yeah, you can't do that annually okay.
No, that's.
It'd be the same company, whoever we hired with.
And
okay.
usually, they'll do that, it's pretty quick. If they've installed a system, say you've got a Macintosh or a Windows PC, once you've spent the $1,000 for that, your little update, it's pretty cheap. So from my experience, several of the consultants will do a quick $2,000 or $3,000, $5,000 cost update to your plan every couple of years. But make sure you negotiate that in advance, some of those terms. But yeah, we can't come in and do a repeat of the work we didn't do, so to speak. And like I said before, we're no longer, never really were. I think Richard had a certain skill set that was targeted toward compensation design. There's a lot of statistics and regression modeling, and there are things called point factor analysis that you have to do. The scope of the job, the size of the job, difficulty of the job, and all these other things that come into calculating how much that market value is for that job. It's like pricing peanut butter. So Skippy's going to be more than great value. So you have to do that. And they can come in and kind of reset their work pretty quickly. We don't do that because we don't have staff that's expert in those things.
I know. We was lucky to have Richard to do it when he did.
Yes. I know enough about it to be dangerous, but I'm not comfortable staking people's livelihoods on my expertise. The certified compensation professional is actually a designation in the human resource world. It takes 4 years of testing and study and about 10 grand to get that certification. So that's one reason these comp consultants charge a little bit, is because it's almost like a college degree in and of itself to get that certification. We don't have a CCP in-house. But within that plan, the last point, this may be the most important point, is make sure that you have some sort of documented flexibility when you hire hard to staff, rare skill, dire need positions, that you can compensate them appropriately in that range based on years of experience. So I'll give you an example. What we do, or what UT does, is when they hire staff, they have a pay range with a market median midpoint and a start. And depending on your years of experience, your education, your certification, you start off either closer to or right on that midpoint, whereas some other people with fewer years of experience, lesser education, fewer certifications, or no certification would start either close to at the beginning of that scale. So it allows you to differentiate based on, at least to some degree, And then another thing to consider is when you put together your vacation leave policies, you may hire somebody who has 30 years of experience that doesn't want to start with 1 or 2 weeks of vacation. They might say, I've got 4, I've got 5 where I'm at. I'll come to work for you if you pay me what I'm making, because I don't have to drive to Cookville. And if you give me my vacation that I have now. So you have to make those value decisions. So that is part of your pay and benefits compensation, total reward system that need to be considered along with this, if that makes sense. Okay, I got that done in under 30 minutes. I think I'm doing all right. So I just want to say thanks for letting me come talk to you about this and give you some perspective that I've been able to gain in the last little bit looking at some of the numbers. Yes, sir.
Yeah, a couple of questions is, can you share that slide show with me, and maybe I could give
Sure.
it to the board members if they need one?
It's on that thumb drive right there, and it is your property.
Oh, okay.
So you can
Fair
have
enough. And I'd like to have a list of the folks that could do the pay comp studies.
I'll email it to you sitting right here.
Okay,
I'll
good.
make sure you get that before I leave
And
tonight.
in particularly the ones that have dealt with Tennessee cities.
Yes. I'll let you know which ones. There, Arthur Gallagher in Nashville, Burris Thompson and Associates, I know they have. I've actually had them vend personally when I was an HR director in two separate cities, so I know they do, and I'll send you that list
Thank
as
you.
well.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Anybody have any questions for, because that's, I mean, without, anybody can speak here, but it sounds like we definitely are in, from your study there, that we need to do a pay comp study.
I would
That's what
recommend
it's-
it.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
what
sir.
you're recommending, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you, lady and gentlemen.
Any questions before John leaves? All right, thank you very much.
All right,
Appreciate you.
I'll turn the button off now.
All right.
We've been saving up for it.
What about those 11 in a row back there?
All right, Mr. Warren Nevad is here with us today to talk about some possible charter revisions. Everybody has had an opportunity, we have sent these out a couple of times, to take a look at the charter. Of course, Warren's here to answer any questions, if any. And we have had some conversations in the past about taking a look at charter change as far as going to the possible city manager form of government versus what we have had now. Right there on C17, you'll see there on what you've got. But I'm not going to go over this page by page. You all have had an opportunity to look at this, and you can stop me at any point or add to or take away. One of the things, I want to get back to that, but one of the things I think that I would certainly like to see done, changed here, is where on page C18 on the alderman shall receive no compensation for their services. Did you give Andre a copy? Okay. For their services. That's one change I think that certainly needs to be done. And again, folks, jump in here. If you've got things marked and you want to discuss them, we can. Is there any discussion on that? I think we all agree that that's deserving, I hope.
I hope it's retroactive.
Yeah, we'll see on that. That, Mr. Griffin can tell you that. I don't know if it's retroactive or not.
Talking about
once it gets
compensation
back.
for elected officials?
Right.
That would only apply to the next term of office.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You mean if we change this charter right here, we won't get paid?
No, it'd be just the next term of office, because state constitution doesn't allow elected officials to increase the compensation during their terms.
So it would go in effect September 1, 2024. That's when it would go in effect. We'd have to change the charter, and then according to what Warren, Mr. Neva had said, that's when it would go in effect. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. Something that,
Try, David.
That's a bunch of crap. I mean, we get our butts eat up one side and down to the other. I've been on the board here since, I think, '04 or '06 or something. And, I mean, that's a bunch of crap. And I ain't saying I have to have the money, but that's just wrong.
Maybe one option is for the city to look at a maybe reimbursement policy, like in your business, if you travel or something, you would get per mileage or for meals or something like that, per diem.
I think we already
Okay.
have that, if anybody's doing anything. David, I'm with
Yeah.
you. I agree. On C27, and I'm just, some things that I've marked up here, is under municipal elections, when we talk about Wednesday, Wednesday is just it was set up for Wednesdays years and years ago, and I thought change that to Tuesdays. Keep it in June, but the first day of that person to take office would be July 1, and they wouldn't have to wait from June to September 1, which is an extremely long time. Couple of reasons that we would still be independent. We wouldn't be crowded in with the county offices. We are all independents when it comes to running, and you don't have to fall in danger of being classified as one of the parties. But that's just an idea. It just, you'd have the election will be the first Tuesday in June, and the winners would take office on July 1.
Well, and that would allow those newly elected people to have some say in the budgeting cycle too, right? 'Cause don't we-
Well, the budget would be complete.
At the end of June?
Yeah, the new budget takes effect July 1. It's
I've
just,
always thought that was kind of bad, that an outgoing person that had already lost the election was still having all the say on the budget. for the
well,
next
if you
year.
remember the,
You could adopt a continuing budget resolution if you wanted to give the board time to adopt the budget for at that time, the current fiscal year. Have you ever adopted a continuing budget resolution? Okay.
I think we have before, but of course, we try to get ours passed and second reading,
Right.
all that before July 1, so we've not had we have the right to do that, but we haven't. Any discussion on that? I mean, on the,
I mean, I'll just restate that I think the newly elected person is just coming in on board right when that budget has basically passed of something that they had no say in. And they're going to be serving that first year in office and had zero input on the budget part.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it may take a whole bunch of changes to ever make it to where those newly elected people would have a say in it.
right, so,
But the way it stands now is they're not going to have any say until September. You just,
It's worse now.
yeah.
If they still don't have any say, it just gets passed the day before they take office, basically.
But the only way you do it then is if you moved the election to May and they came in first of June. Right? Because then they would have June to catch up and be in.
I'm okay with that. The big thing for me was the Wednesdays elections and then not taking office for basically 90 days after you're elected. That's just a little long. I mean, again, this is a work session, we're not voting on anything, just discussion. If that's, I mean, if you want to,
Yeah, we'll have to have a legal review on that because somebody could make the argument, if you will, that you're shortening my term by 2 months. You know, I was elected and my term was supposed to be until September. Now you're shortening it to July, so I got to check with the lawyers on that.
Andre is here, he's our city attorney. Andre, do you have an opinion on that?
I don't think an elected office is a property interest, and I don't think that it would be a deprivation under due process to shorten somebody's term, especially if you do it by legislative action. But that doesn't mean that somebody wouldn't be upset about it and try to do something. So,
Yeah.
That's the practical part.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have you been in touch with our attorneys, Melissa or Stephanie?
I haven't yet.
Okay.
Can you follow up on that,
Yeah.
Andre, please?
What are the full names?
We'll check with Stephanie Allen O'Hara. She's the legal consultant in my territory. Melissa helps out sometimes, so, but yeah, Stephanie would be the point of contact. Mhm. Yeah, we like it for, like, the city attorneys to contact our legal consultants. Okay.
Yeah, I would be, like Rex said, I'd be in favor of the election May, take office in June, but you charge it more than y'all are talking about, but yeah. Just so that they've got some input on that.
Usually, so the, excuse my ignorance here, but the county primaries sometimes are in May, is that?
Well, maybe.
That's what I don't know if there's any other
Conflict
election
with
with May.
Well, I mean, I know the primaries usually, is that right?
I guess that's correct.
It's kind of unusual you've had them on a Wednesday. Most folks,
It is.
Tuesday or Thursday. I never heard an election on Wednesday.
But one of the good things is, when you pass the ordinance, there is public hearings on the second reading, because we have to have a second reading on the budget. So that of course, I understand what you're saying, that they don't have a true seat at the table when it comes to setting the budget. But, I mean, as a guest or as a visitor, they can certainly sit in on it and voice their opinion for what that's worth. I'm just weighing it all out, you know.
If they were really passionate about it, they'd show up for that and speak.
Right. I mean, I think. Is that something that we're a thumbs up on, or in May or June, or what are you?
I'm certainly good with changing it to Tuesday instead of Wednesday, and then the month thing, whatever everybody else thinks on that's fine by me.
Well, June is the odd, and at least that keeps it to.
One option is to have the election the same days when the county, that you could probably save on expenses there, that instead of having your own separate election.
Well, we've been independent, and a lot of times, if you're not careful, we get classified with the two parties. At least in the city election, it's independent, and you're not thrown in there with them. I was just trying to avoid that.
Okay.
But thank you.
Yeah.
You're right, though.
I know you're looking for an answer, but I don't have one. I'm good with Tuesdays, and I'm good with the June starting in July, if that's what it needs to be.
All right, well,
If that makes more sense.
Yeah, I think the main question is the start date will infringe upon the length of the term, so, okay.